I've had moments where I've cried, and I've had transformative moments on the mountain. And it's been one of the things that I have to do, because not only do I get to learn about culture, right, as I explore these different countries, I get to learn about myself. And so those moments of just unplugging and being on a mountain and hiking one step after another. I love Cal Newport talks about it in Deep Work, as we take that one thought and we do something active to just noodle on it.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. B, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And today we've got a super big treat, something that we don't talk about often, but really the master of communicating, the skill of communicating, the skill of knowing that we are connected to something much, much bigger. It is really my belief that what separates us, thinking that we are separate from the people around us on the planet, is actually accelerating us faster than we ever had gone through before. And our need to fuel ourselves and just look after ourselves, this self-based, ego-based, survival and fear-based mindset, actually increases inflammation in our body, lowers our immune system, putting us prone to chronic symptoms, chronic disease. Think about it. Everything in life is connected to something much bigger. And if we took a cell in the human body and it just looked after itself, it puts its own growth before anything else, it becomes what's called a cancer cell in the body. And that actually destroys the entire organism. Well, very similarly, we are actually connected. We are simply a cell in the body and the consciousness of our families, of our teams, of humanity itself. And if we could start to adopt the truth of that mindset, we will release the stress, the burden, the regret, the negative emotions in our life, knowing that we are supported, that we are part of something much, much bigger. And today's conversation is super important because it actually starts to open the doorway. How do we start to connect? How do we start to understand that other people, even if they have different ideas, different values, different beliefs, how can we start to recognize that we are still connected? This person gives us the framework, the mindsets for us to be able to adopt, to fully rediscover who we are. And in doing so, it's going to allow you to elevate in your health, in your relationships, and your businesses. Because I can tell you that I have gone through parts of my life where the communication, not understanding, just being in my own world, has disconnected me with the person in my life, my love, my partner, Tiffany, and it was just so much drained energy in our space. And that was because we weren't able to really see and understand each other. You're going to get those tools today, because not only do these relationships affect our romantic relationships, but they affect our health, because we are connected with so many different people around us in our everyday life. And certainly it affects our businesses and what we want to do as we impact the world, because we need other people to lift up our energy, to lift up our mission and purpose in our organizations and our humanitarian efforts. So you're not going to want to miss this podcast, because I guarantee you're going to build the skills and the mindsets to elevate your communication and your relationships in all levels of your life. Now, before we get into the conversation, though, let me welcome all the first-time comers to the Thrive State Podcast. If I had some music now, I would throw it up, because I am so excited that this podcast attracted your attention. This is really a place where I get to share the thoughts and ideas from leaders all over the world in the fields of longevity, of human performance, human potential, happiness, health, so that you can bring yourself, your energy, your life into what's possible, the next possibility, than what we are potentially constrained, restricted, and conditioned to have in our limited self. I want you to become Neo in the own matrix of your mind to expand what is possible for your health, for your happiness, and for your human potential. And for all you coming back, thank you for coming back. You're helping the show grow. And if you haven't done so, please help us out by leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard, subscribing to the podcast, turning on the notification buttons, sharing this podcast with your friends and family members, and engaging it with your comment. All those activities are going to help the energy, help the flow, help this podcast and this message get to more people. So thank you so much. And as a free gift to all of you, I want to give you a bundle of resources in the performance and longevity world, breathwork exercises, ebooks, everything for you to get started, for you to have some simple tools you can take with you to start to change the frequency and energy of your life. Go to ThriveStateStarter.com. Get that all for free. It's my free gift to you that actually fuels our biology to help us live longer and more productive lives. So get that framework with the second edition of my book. Go to ThriveStateBook.com to check that out. Now, my next guest is actually somebody who is in the keynote speaking world like myself, and he goes all around the world. And man, this guy's got the embodiment of energy. When you listen to him, and we do a very fun segment in the 5 to Thrive, he's got some great surprises for you. So check out this episode. But he's the embodiment of energy. He is finding it both at home as a dedicated husband and father of 4 spirited children. And he's also and atop of the world's highest peaks, having conquered one of the famed 7 summits. This guy is an avid climber. But his passion for elevation doesn't end with trekking. It's mirrored in his professional ascent as a captivating business speaker. You could tell from his energy through our conversation today that this is what he brings to stages, and he brings innovative social insights to every single workplace. Our podcast guest is the driving force and the CEO behind a movement that empowers organizations across the globe, delivering over 50 keynote addresses a year on the pivotal topics of meaningful work and inclusion. His mission is to ignite a transformation in corporate culture, guiding organizations and individuals to ascend to their peak potential through the mastery of mindset, purpose, and performance. He's not only a pathfinder in the wilderness, but also in the literary world, authoring essential reads as Your Why Matters Now, The Inclusive Mindset, and his latest thought-provoker, I Respectfully Disagree, How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. His work is a compass for those seeking direction on creating connections in an often fragmented society. With a flair for infusing humor in his well-researched content, Justin doesn't just give a speech, he crafts an experience, leaving audiences not just informed, but transformed. And you're going to see this with our podcast conversation today. So ladies and gentlemen, open up your hearts and your energy field, because you will feel this beautiful human being. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Jones-Fosu. Justin Jones-Fosu, welcome to the Thrive State Podcast, brother. Dude, I am loving the energy. And I was just reading over your bio on your website and all the testimonials saying you bring it to the stage and you have all this energy. And so I want people to be able to tap into that in a second. But bring this energy to a portion of the podcast called the 5 to Thrive. You might not be familiar with it, but 5 questions pulled out of my rear end, 1,000 points each. And if you win, you get a healthy meal on me the next time we meet. My questions to you, Mr. Justin Jones-Fosu, are you ready to play the 5 to Thrive?
I've been ready my whole life.
Okay, you ready to bring it? Here we go. I'm putting you on stage with 100,000 people. TV screens all over the place, eyes on you, hand you a mic, and you're going to sing a karaoke song. Which one is it?
Do you remember the time when we fell in love? Do you remember the time when we first met, girl?
Oh, 1,500 points there, brother. That's awesome. Question number 2 is, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
To help give other people empathy.
Oh, to be able to feel what the other person's feeling. Beautiful. 2,000 points. Actually, 2,500. You got those extra credit points the first round. Question number 3 was, what one book, quote, or phrase entered your life, and after embodying that knowledge, life completely shifted?
Wow. There's so many quotes that I can't give you the exact quote, but the book is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And the essence of, we have the power to choose, that there's a gap between stimulus and response, and it's always our power, no matter what we're going through, to choose.
Between stimulus and response, there's a space. Yes. And in that space is our power to choose a response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. One of my favorite quotes. You got extra points there. So 4,000 points out of 3 questions. You're winning, my friend. Question 4 is what's coming out of right now. Got it. It was, what did you want to be growing up as a child?
So many different things my mom tells me. I think the one thing that she often shares is I wanted to be president of the United States. And many of my teachers said they would have voted for me. I'm not sure my mom would have voted for me, but my teachers would have. So.
If you were in the election this year, I would definitely vote for you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Last question is, what are you most proud of?
Being a dad.
Yeah.
Love being a dad. It's the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I had 2. I just got married about 3 months ago. So now I have 4.5. Some people tell me 5 because I have 4 of the 2-legged occasion and 1 of the 4-legged occasion. So, yes.
Beautiful, brother. 5,000 points. You win the 5-3.
Woo, woo, woo. I'll win. I'll win.
Healthy meal. I just feel like that if we meet in real life, we would definitely be doing a lot of dancing and jiving together, my brother.
Absolutely. You will have that.
I can't wait to get into this, but I want to just start off. You're right now flying all over the world, speaking to corporate America on peak performance, on culture, on how to be able to speak to each other. But I recall the story you mentioned, or I was reading about, of how you just started at a very early age of 14 dishwashing.
Yeah.
What was childhood? How did you get that spirit to do so much so early? And how did you evolve into what you're doing right now?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, that was actually one of my first jobs, working for someone else. I was a paperboy before that, and I was an entrepreneur before that. I had a lawn care business that failed very big time. But think how I got here actually came from a lot of trauma. I was physically and emotionally abused by an older sibling growing up, who we've reconciled and since forgiven. He's 8 years older than me. Grew up largely without the active presence of my dad in my life through a lot of complicated things. And so I had a lot of low self-esteem, didn't think highly of myself, was rejected a lot. We grew up, didn't have a lot of money early on, had a stint of being unhoused, grew up on welfare. And so I became a chameleon to gain acceptance because I hated rejection and I hated what I felt and not feeling good enough often. And so I would work hard to try to feel good enough. And over the years, through a really good therapist that I still have, please, everybody get therapy. I believe in it, not because something's wrong with you, even though my kids would say something different, but it's to keep things going right. And it shifted to a more healthy space of I'm now comfortable with Justin, and it's planting seeds and having a true heart and desire, not for people to accept me, because some of the things I say are hard truths, but for people to choose to be better when the seed germinates.
Yeah, thanks for being so vulnerable on trauma. I think so many people think that they have to have physical abuse or divorce in the family or drugs or neglect or someone in jail, these bigger T traumas that think that it's trauma, but not being seen, not being heard, and not being able to express who you really are. And just like you, I was seeking success. And for me, 8 years ago, I was overweight. I was diabetic as a medical doctor on prescription medications. And if we are living our life through our trauma, through the ego that tries to protect us against our old traumas, we're unconsciously making choices that drive the inflammatory response in our body. For you, what was that moment to say, hey, you know what, I need some help?
You're going real deep. So it's college. Being in college, my freshman year, we had a speech class, Dr. Stevens, and amazing woman, loved her class, had a crush on her as well. One of the things I loved is that she had you do a shoebox activity. And in the shoebox activity, that was going to be your speech. And so I don't know if this would fly today because I'm not sure if it would fly. But you had to sit in the middle of class in a chair, one of the swiveling chairs, and people sat around you in a circle, and they shared how they honestly felt about you or thought about you. And so people went around, Justin, I think you're a great motivator. I think you're going to be great for our university. I think you're a hoe. Justin, I think that you're great. Going to do great things to represent the males on the thing. Justin, I think you're a womanizer.
Mm.
And so going around, and all you could say was thank you. There's nothing else you can say. You couldn't defend yourself. You couldn't justify. And in the activity of the shoebox, you had to, on the outside, you had to decorate the shoebox based upon what other people thought of you. And in the inside, you had to share what you thought of yourself.
Mm.
And I remember presenting, and 40% of the class cried doing their shoebox activity. I was one of the 40%. And I remember it started unpacking why I was some of the ways that I was, because I used to be a hoe and I used to be a womanizer. And so those things weren't false. And I still was a motivator and all these great things. But as I unpacked that, one of the things I remember was we have free counseling in our school. And I remember going to see a therapist, and one of the things I started to learn that some of those behaviors and womanizing and being a hoe, all those things, was my form of acceptance. I used sex at that point as a way of acceptance because I was rejected in so many aspects of my life. And I remember going back that summer and apologizing to every woman that I could find that I felt I disrespected in a way that I didn't honor her and her body. And I uncovered some of not only the abuse, but then also I didn't even realize that I had been sexually molested by an older female cousin when I was younger, because there was no language for men, for me at that time, as a man, to talk about being molested by a woman. It normally was like male to a young woman. And so when we unpacked that, I was like, oh my God. And so all of these things were so helpful. That therapy moment and those consistent therapy sessions helped me to start uncovering some of my past to help me to launch into a better future.
Dude, that's beautiful. And thank you so much for being so vulnerable. And I find myself in that story because I was a hoe as well. Didn't unpack that until my late 30s. So you got definitely an early start, brothers. But thank you for sharing that. So much of how we show up in the world and potentially how we sabotage ourselves comes from things we need to do the inner work to heal.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that was just a catalyst. There was still some hoishness that occurred beyond that, but that was a great catalyst moment, and has helped me to where I am today. So I'm thankful for it. It wasn't like, boom, I'm good, I'm healed. No, it took a lot of work and some years to get there.
That's beautiful. Like, one of the things that I read, one of the first testimonials I read on your website was just how much you bring energy into an environment.
Yeah.
And that energy is fuel for everything. I teach people physical ways that to tap into their energy so that they could show up in the world doing the things that they want to do, to be able to take their performance. And I know you recently came out with a book. The book is I Respectfully Disagree: How to Have Difficult Conversations in This Divided World. And I could tell you, a world that is divided is a divided world in my house sometimes with my partner. I disagree. And I will tell you right now that when we disagree and we don't come up with a constructive way to be able to move through that, I energetically feel drained. And I know how I show up at work, how I show up as a dad, how I show up on stage, all is affected by that.
Yeah.
So this is something I don't think people talk about a lot, and which I'm like really interested in diving into a little bit more. How did you even know that this is something that people need a solution to?
I came out of just listening to my audience and to participants in our workshops. So my last book was Inclusive Mindset. And so we started working with Fortune 50 companies and helping them walk through the inclusive mindset and how to create these more inclusive cultures. And one of the statements I would always make, whether in our sessions or in a presentation, is that we can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and yet still passionately pursue their humanity. And there was always this audible, like, ooh, and then people would come up after the session and they'd be like, Justin, I love that quote. And they'd often get it wrong, but I understood the essence of it. And they were like, how do we do it? How do I do it? Or they would try to stump me and be like, what if they say this? Or what if they believe this? And this book became the answer and to that question, how do we do it? As well as, well, what if they say this? And so I wanted to give people practical tools. Our whole essence is a heart-based approach. So we operate by the heart, head, hand model, starting with the heart rather than the head. And how do we give it to the everyday person? And so I started asking, how does the everyday person engage disrespectful disagreements? And how do we spend more time in respectful disagreements? And so that became the whole heartbeat, the essence of just connecting to the heart of people. And so that's one of the reasons that I've learned, because it doesn't always come easy, I've learned to be vulnerable because I really want to connect to the heart. I don't want to put on a facade. I want people to know I am imperfect. I make a whole bunch of mistakes. I'm learning. I haven't arrived and never will be because I'm always on this journey. But that became that catalyst moment of people asking, how do we do it? And even trying to stump me on, well, what if they say this? That was a moment.
Yeah, got it. And it sounds probably right at the start of every moment when somebody throws something at you and you react to that is probably creating a little bit of space. And then from there, being able to consciously choose what comes next. So what might be step one? I have the intuition that it has something to do with your heart in terms of like how you start to respond to that comment or thing that's triggering you.
Yes, you're close, but we have 5 pillars, and the first pillar actually starts before any disagreement even occurred. And we had 4, but this was the last one that was added, and it happens to be the first. And pillar number 1 is challenge your perspective. And challenge your perspective is exercising the muscles where you're consistently putting yourselves in positions of learning about others, right? And so people ask me, where did this come from for you? And it came from my mom. My mom was one of the first Black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force. And one of the things she shared is there were sometimes she was stationed in Japan for 2 years, and there were some soldiers in that same 2-year time frame that never left base. And she was like, Justin, I never want you to be like that. I want you to be able to go out and experience the beauty of people and cultures around you. And so that became the heartbeat. And I realized many years ago, I wasn't living up to my mom's ideals. I was staying in home base. And so I challenged myself to create this strategic way to lean into this that initially was called the 6-month challenge that we now call the Circles of Grace challenge, where every 6 to 12 months I go to events, experiences, or I engage with people in either which I don't know a lot about or I disagree with. Why is that important, Kien? That's important because the more we exercise the muscles of listening to others, right? Now, when I go, I ask 2 questions. What did I learn about event experiences and people? And what did I learn about myself? The more we exercise those muscles, the more when we get into those disagreements, the easier it is to be able to actually listen and engage because we've been actively hearing opinions and perspectives that are different than ours, that are outside of our normal sphere. And so that's the first place to start is before any disagreement occurs, is consistently putting yourselves in positions of learning, doing what Carol Dweck challenges us to be and operate from the growth mindset perspective where we're consistently like failure and ignorance just means we don't know it yet. And failure is just another data point of learning.
Now, so many people may feel, who might be newer to the personal development space, might think that their worlds, their ideas, all these things are fixed because that's how they approach life with. It sounds like what you're saying is that really first space is maybe allowing the open possibility that there are other truths that are out there. How do people start to first just adapt into what my reality, my truth might not be what is actually real and existent throughout the world?
All we have to do is look in our past. All of us have had things that we once thought was absolutely 100% true, Santa Claus, and then it was shattered. They were like, wait a minute, this truth is not real.
Wait a minute, are you breaking it? Wait, what are you saying here, my friend?
I am sharing a groundbreaking, this is now going to go viral because people have realized Santa Claus is not true. But the whole, like, we've all had these moments in our lives. We look back through our history where we're like, oh my gosh, I believe this and now I don't, or this has more complexity than it once did, or wow, this is grayer than I thought it was. And that's, if we look at those moments, it opens us up to that could still happen for the rest of our life. But the older we get, we start operating by what Carol Dweck dives into in mindset, by that fixed-based mindset. So now we just want to look good compared to other people. Even if we start to think something's different, we don't want to let them know because, oh, they may perceive that I'm ignorant or I don't know something. And in our society, we do that over and over again. Imagine, I've done this where somebody's asked, oh, have you seen that movie? I'm like, oh yeah, that was a good movie, right? And we haven't seen the movie, but we're trying to protect that. Oh, I know it and I know a lot. And so the way we lean into that is by doing, right? I love what the research on learning says. They talk about from a performance perspective, they call it the inverted U. And there's 2 places that there's not an ideal aspect of performance and or learning. And I'll put it from the learning perspective. The first place is when we think we know everything. And the second place we don't learn as effectively is when we think we know nothing. And so that's why we implemented the strategy of leaning into the Circles of Grace challenge as a way to begin the learning process. And we borrow some things from our 3x5 beginner allyship model of saying, hey, if you just want a place to start, what if you started with 3x5, right? Talk to 3 people that may hold that ideology or those types of people, or read 3 books, 3 journal articles, research-based journal articles, watch 3 videos or TEDx and those things, and maybe 3 movies. And that's just a starting place. And it's helped me so much because even my circle's greatest challenge at one point was police officers. I realized I had a really fixed belief around police officers. So I did a police ride along in Charlotte and talked to my police officers' friends. And I was like, oh my gosh, I learned so much and developed such a deep sense of empathy that I didn't have before. But I had to come at it from the perspective of, wow, there's still something for me to learn. There's still some places for me to leave home base and explore because this world is really dope and amazing.
Hey, it's Dr. B. Going to take a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of my very favorite biohacks. It is the very compact Kien Vuu Plus Pro. I take it with me wherever I travel. I leave it at home as well because it's one of these things that uses patented laser red light therapy to go deep into the tissues to reduce inflammation and to reduce pain. I travel all the time, I work out, I've got these aches and pains that are everywhere. This device has been game-changing. There are also some studies suggesting using this can reduce systemic inflammation as well. To find out more about the device, you can go to their website, kinion.io, or check out the website I did with their founder, Forrest Smith, on episode 181 of the Thrive State podcast. And as a loyal listener to the show, you actually get a very special discount by using the code ThriveStatePC. That's ThriveStatePC for podcasts. Trust me, this is one investment in your health and your wellness that you won't forget. So go ahead, get the Vuu Plus Pro today to take your performance, your health, and get rid of pain for good. Okay, now back to the show.
Yeah, in there I heard 2 of your other pillars really is to be the students and to cultivate curiosity. And it's certainly that if you are in the energy and consciousness of curiosity, you almost leave judgment behind the door, yeah?
Yes and no. You check judgment like the code. Because we all have judgment, right? It comes in, we can't stop it. It comes in, but we acknowledge that judgment, right? And say, hey, I'm going to check you at the door for a moment. Let me keep diving in. It's what I did in my TEDx song called Don't Take the Exit on People. Right? It's that our brains work this way. I'll give you a great example. Monday through Friday, we take the exit. We're supposed to go straight one day, but what do? We take the exit because our brains want to conserve energy for things it thinks it doesn't know. And so when we get second and third hand information, we categorize it for future use. And instead of driving towards some really interesting and intricate humans, we take the exit on them based upon what we've categorized. So our brains are actually hurting us, and it's operation of conserving energy. And so our challenge is, what if we create systems and things in place to help us to drive forward towards some really amazing humans, to hear, to ask questions, to say things like, tell me more, to engage in the power of 3, another practical way. People ask, how do we do this for real? Power of 3 is a great thing. We do it in each of our sessions because what we found in our research is that people only listen to the power of 1 or power of 2, is that they don't get to that third level of conversation, right? So if I was like, hey, Kien, how are you doing today? And you're like, I'm fine. I'm like, I'm fine too. Power of 1. Oh, hey, Kien, how you doing today? I'm fine. What makes you fine? Oh, I heard this interesting bald-head speaker. I'll remember that bald-head speaker. That's power of 2. Versus taking all those 2 and say, oh, he said it's interesting bald-head speaker. What made him interesting? And then you share. But we often don't get to that third level of our conversation because we're bringing it back to us. And we're trying to make connections. But sometimes in our desire to make connections, we end up taking control. And so the power of 3 is one way to really dive into cultivating your curiosity, where we focus on filling the gaps with curiosity and not conclusions.
Yeah. Tell us about this concept. Your 4th pillar is seeking the gray.
Yeah, there's 50 shades of it, as we all know. I'm trying to add a 51. I don't know what that one would be. But the gray, when I did my MBA, I had one of those really cool professors that was like Dead Poets Society. If you haven't seen the movie, it's a dope movie. But like the late Robin Williams. And he would have you sit in the middle of the classroom for 10 minutes, do nothing, and then write a 10-page paper about it. Phenomenal professor. But one of the books he had us read, I was like, why are we reading this? This is MBA. Oh, and he had us read a book that's been transformative to me. It was called Dialogue, The Art of Thinking Together by William Isaacs. And in the book, the premise is most people are trying to argue A with the person who's B. And then B is trying to argue B with the person who's A. And it's asking, what if we came up with C together? Now, C doesn't have to be 50-50, and oftentimes it's not. But it's what is that common ground that we're both missing, right? So I'll give you a hard example, gun rights versus gun control, right? There's a common ground of both people really care about their families and friends. Now, how they approach it is very different. But I can acknowledge the gray of we both really care about our families and we want to protect them in ways that we feel are helpful, right? That's the common ground. And what the research says around conversational receptiveness is that people are willing to have more conversations with people who are open to seeking common understanding, but also hedging their claims. And so that's the seek the gray, is where we, instead of the black and white, if you take a look at the cover of my book, most people see the diagonal white and the diagonal black. But what most people can't see until I tell them is a very thin line of gray. And that's the thing that we're supposed to seek. But we often, based on confirmation bias and other things within our brains, we want to just go to the easy black and white. And my challenge to myself and to others is to find that gray as we engage with real life people.
I can't wait to put this all into practice with something that oftentimes shows up in my life. But before we do that, pillar number 5 is agree to respect. Yeah. And it really sounds like there's an action plan behind that step or that pillar.
Yeah, it comes back to the question you asked me at the top about one of my favorite books, is that we always have the power to choose to respect the other person. Right? Even in the book, we had to work through, how do we define respect? In our society, there's many definitions. And one of those, what we call societal definitions that we had to debunk, was that respect must be earned. And we start asking the question, why? Where did this whole concept that you have to earn my respect for me to give it to you come from? No, I can choose to freely give you respect, whether you respect me or you don't. Sometimes we're just called to be seed planters. Right? And so we talk about this, called the 3FA framework, that we can fully acknowledge people, whether they 100% agree, they partially agree, or they 100% disagree. I can say, Kien, I really appreciate what you shared with me today. I never heard it said that way before. Kien, you mentioned 3 things, and number 2 really stood out to me. I'm going to have to dive deeper in that. Or, wow, Kien, this has been a really tough conversation, and I just want to say thank you so much for choosing to lean in. Now, not once did I just say I agreed with you, but for some strange reason, in our conversations with people, we have equated full acknowledgement to full acceptance or full agreement, and it's not. We can always choose to fully acknowledge someone, whether we agree or not agree. I love John Giles, Stanford professor. She came up with this concept called thank you because. Because we often say when somebody says something we disagree with, we say no, because that's stupid, or no, because that, versus thank you because what you just shared has helped me to think about this in a different way. There are so many ways that we can agree to respect, but the first thing that we must come to is that we have the power to choose to respect someone else, whether they respect us or not.
I love these pillars, and what I'm getting from it is so much of it comes from just the daily work and mindsets in building a possibility of all different ideas and concepts, and understanding even before you get into a confrontation or a disagreement that these things are possible, so that you could meet this particular trigger or confrontation with the openness that it can have. So going back to a place where, say we're in a heated conversation, somebody comes up and just says, hey, Justin, you're an idiot. And whatever those things might be, A, B, C, D, E, F, and all the reasons. What might be some tangible steps in a heated argument or something coming at you where you can maybe incorporate all this? And and I know for sure if somebody took these pillars ahead of time and started to do some of this pre-work, potentially that trigger will be lessened just by doing that work. But how does somebody approach it?
Yeah, let me break the bubble and the balloon that I am not perfect. While writing, on my writing retreat for writing, I respectfully disagree. I disrespectfully disagreed with someone. So let me break that bubble. Now, I apologize quicker than I usually do, but let me break the fallacy that you'll never disrespectfully disagree. No. But let me give you 3 things, 3 really quick, tangible ways. Number 1, you have to assess, are you even available, emotionally available, psychologically available to have this disagreement in a helpful, meaningful way? There's been many times where in order to respectfully disagree with someone, I've asked to take a pause. because of what our brains do in those moments when I'm triggered or when the frontal cortex and all the work that happens there. And I have to say, hey, I really want to have a productive conversation, and I don't think I can bring a way to have this productive conversation. Are you open to having this conversation a little bit later, or can we schedule something? And that's one of the first ways that we have to ask, are we even available, emotionally available to have this conversation? Sometimes I've said no, right? Number one. Number two, say if somebody came to say I'm an idiot, my initial senses are to defend. Now, if I am prepped for something like this, I normally ask more questions now. What am I an idiot about? Because I may just thinking that we just had a conversation. They were talking about something completely different than what I'm talking about. And I'm like, oh, when you turned left and you didn't put on your blinker, right? Versus I'm thinking they're talking about something I just shared with them, right? I don't know, but to ask more questions to come to an understanding of what that person is actually saying. So sometimes if I am emotionally available, I want to ask more questions. I want to engage in the power of three. Ask more questions. Ask at least 3 questions before you dive in to your perspective. Now, here's the kicker. If you choose, because we don't always have to tell people that we disagree with them. There's been a lot of people that have shared perspectives and thoughts with me that I just listened, I've dug deeper, and I came with a better understanding of how they got there. I still disagreed. And I didn't have to say, I disagree with that. No. But if we choose to, we call it the 2 statements. First, after you've expressed and demonstrated that you better understand how they got there, or you can at least find that place of common ground. Oh, I see how you got there. Or thank you so much for sharing X. Is to ask them if you can give your perspective. And I know that is counterculture in our society, because social media, I can just post something and I don't have to ask anybody and I just put it out there. But one of 2 things will happen. One, they'll say no, which very rarely happens. That it still does happen for me. And if they say no, then why are you wasting your time? Is it really more about you getting it off your chest? And if so, there's support group, friends and stuff to do that. Or if you're trying to have a productive conversation, now what Justin has learned to do is keep the bridge open. I used to burn the bridge. I didn't want to talk to you anyway, right? But now I'm learning to say, hey, I understand it's a tough conversation. If you ever want to have it later, let me know. Because we've all said some stuff that we didn't mean in a moment when we're heated and we're operating in a space that we didn't mean and intend to. And we want somebody to hopefully leave the bridge open rather than burn a bridge, because unlikely that will come back when the bridge has been burned. So that's one if they say no. If they say yes, then I share in a way of not what we call hedging our claims. And so that's the research on conversational receptiveness, that I don't speak in absolutes, where it's, wow, one of the things I've seen from my perspective, Kien, is that, oftentimes what I've seen is, or I can see that sometimes in society this, but I'm not saying this always happens. Every single time, only perspective that I have. And so that's one, those are 3 really practical ways. Quick recap of that. Number 1, assess if you are emotionally available. Feel like you're in a place of psychological safety to even have the conversation. If not, ask to come back. If you dive in, communicate in a way that you've connected and been able to express common ground and ask if they're open to receiving your perspective. If they say no, leave the bridge open. Try your best. If they say yes, share it in a way where you've hedged your claims and share your perspective. Over and over again, I love the research that bears this out. It shows that even in these moments of great disagreement, people that find those common grounds are able to hedge their claims and a couple other things. People still want to have conversations with them, even the really big and tough ones.
So beautiful. And can't wait to put it into action into my own life. This is a critical conversation. If we want to build the world that we want to be the individual cells that forms the tissues and the organs of the fabric of humanity, we need to be able to connect. And these tools are so valuable. And I just want to thank you for your wisdom. How do people find out more about how to get the book and your personal work if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you. I love your brain. I love how you think. I love how you connect things. And what I love about you, and we have the similarity, is that it's about practice. It's not about, I tried it once and it didn't work. I got it. No, it's about consistently doing it. So thank you for that. And ways that people can continue that practice is in How to Respectfully Disagree, where it has a lot of information. The quiz is coming where you can see where you are on respectful disagreement kind of continuum, and as well as workmeaningful.com. If you want to just connect, Justin Jones-Fosu on LinkedIn, but howtorespectfullydisagree.com, workmeaningful.com, and Justin Jones-Fosu on LinkedIn.
Beautiful, brother. It was such a pleasure to connect with you today. And I'm very curious to this answer. Cultivating pillar number 3 is of everything that you encountered in life. And certainly you teach on leadership, on culture, on performance, and all these different things. Mm-hmm. And the answer could be as literal or metaphorical or as physical as you'd like. But what has been your best medicine?
Self-care. And the specific form of self-care, do a thing, 5SC squared, which is 5 ways for self-care. And one of those is one thing daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual. My annual one is an international trek. And it's afforded me the opportunity to climb Kilimanjaro, to hike Patagonia, to hike Machu Picchu, the Grand Canyon, and upcoming Colombia, the Lost City. And like in those moments, I've been free to think and to be without the phone and to process and ask about my life. And I've had moments where I've cried, and I've had transformative moments on the mountain. And it's been one of the things that I have to do, because not only do I get to learn about culture, right, as I explore these different countries, I get to learn about myself. And so those moments of just unplugging and being on a mountain and hiking one step after another. I love Cal Newport talks about it in Deep Work, as we take these that one thought and we do something active to just noodle on it. That's been my best medicine.
Beautiful. Appreciate your time, brother.
What, I know this is your podcast, but what's been your best medicine? I'm really curious on that.
Oh, my best medicine. My best medicine is really the pause. Every time I think life happens and the animal part of my brain takes over, and there's anxiety, there's worry, or these negative loops start coming in, there are different ways that I institute a pause. A very easy one, 4-7-8 breathing. Into your nostrils for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, out as if you were blowing through a straw for a count of 8. We activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And in that pause, I'm always reminded that any one of those feelings, those emotions are coming from the more primitive part of my brain that thinks it's not safe. And certainly if somebody was pointing a gun to my head, or I was falling off of a cliff, or there was a saber-toothed tiger behind me, yes, that would be true, but not in that case. I can go, where am I feeling it? Why am I feeling it? What were those beliefs? And then remind myself what I get to choose in that moment. And if I can institute that pause in more moments of a day, every time I walk through a door, every moment I have before I start a conversation, before I start a podcast, I can start showing up a little bit more consistent with the person I want to become. So the pause is mine.
When did you come up with this?
I'm just doing some spiritual work. I've got this really neat framework that maybe you can take on stage. Make sure you reference me. No, I'm kidding. It's called
Kien.
It's impact, where the I am is the I am. And certainly when you're on a mountain, when you're out there just traveling, when you have time to yourself in meditation, you could define who you are, who you know yourself to be. Joy, generous, loving, whatever that might be. And then the P is pause. And then within that pause, you create that space between stimulus and response, like what Viktor Frankl choose. And then you act, which is A, have awareness, like what I just shared. C, you choose. What do you choose from? You choose from your I am. And then you take action from that space. So the more we include those impact moments into different parts of our day, we become more conscious of the person we know to be inside, and not the person that's reacting from the trauma of our childhood.
Wow. But when did you come up with it, though? When did the impact come?
Probably the last 2 years. I've done some work, and then putting it together in a neat little framework was in the second edition of my book, which I'm happy to send you, brother. Can't wait to read yours as well.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for answering that. And that was very meaningful. I was pausing as you were sharing how to pause. So thank you.
Brother, once I hit the stop record button here, we're going to connect, because I feel a deep connection with you today, and I just wish you the best. I know you got some travel and you got to go, but thank you for your time and wisdom, brother.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking this time, man.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you subscribe to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breath work, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.